Hey, dear Meadows youth. So today is Good Friday, when we observe the death of Christ, the darkest moment in human history, where the Son of God was nailed to a cross, and for one weekend everything seemed like it was lost. It's a deep time, it's a heavy time, and yet it always makes me think of a funny story. If you were at D now, you already heard me tell this, but for those of you who couldn't make it, I'm going to tell a quick version again. That my senior year of college, I had only just re-accepted Christ into my life and affirmed that God was calling me to ministry. And all of that had happened 2 months before. I was approached by a campus minister about participating in an event called the Good Friday Project. Now, the Good Friday Project was an event where artists and musicians and authors got together and shared things that they had been working on that all had to do with the topic of human suffering. So, we had a guy come in with a short play that he had written from the perspective of Job. There was a guy who wrote a book detailing his experiences with cancer. There was a filmmaker who cobbled together all this footage of, the civil rights movement with dogs and fire hoses and the Holocaust and just all these events of extreme suffering and poverty. All of it designed to show just a very broken world. And I had been working on a graphic novel at the time, and they invited me to cobble some of that together into a little short animated film that I was going to show at this event. Now, the thing that I didn't realize going into this was just how intense these different works of arts were going to be, how serious they were going to be. And as I was sitting there seeing these different artists and playwrights and musicians presenting everything they had done, I was in a panic because mine was like really lighthearted and uplifting. Like everything ultimately worked out for my main character, where he found purpose in life again. He wound up reconciling with his estranged fiance. Just everything worked out for this guy. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, I am about to kill the mood at this thing. So finally, it's my turn. I get up there. And, I kind of introduce myself. My voice kind of cracks as I do. I'm very nervous at that point. And I press play on my presentation, and it starts playing. Like, I hear the music going, and I've kind of closed my eyes in fear at this point, and I hear this little, like a couple of gasps here and there. And so I look up, and the projector bulb had burned out, completely derailing my presentation. And it was almost like I could feel a reassuring hand on my shoulder and just that still small voice saying, hey, this is really funny. The thing that I had been so afraid of was killed off because of a technical difficulty. And I did the most inappropriate thing I possibly could. I started laughing right there in the middle of the Good Friday Project. And we're talking like tears, snotty laughter, like, just over the top laughter to the point that I had to excuse myself from the room. And I always take that experience as a reminder not to take ourselves too seriously and to remember that even in the darkest, scariest times, God maintains a sense of humor. We don't talk a lot about the humor of God. But look in the book of Job. God gets sarcastic. Look at Abraham and Sarah, how God introduces a child into their life so late in life, and the kid even gets the name Isaac, which means laughter. God is funny. And when it comes to Good Friday, the darkest moment of human history, that sense of humor is still at work. Because you can see the scene. The Romans and the Jewish leaders standing there watching the Son of God die, with a plaque above his head that says, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, with a crown of thorns on his head. They've draped him in a scarlet robe before to mock him, to demean him, to try and prove that he's a mortal man, which you and I know that he's much more. My friend Tom Penner even talks about how you can imagine little demons dancing around the foot of the cross, rejoicing, saying, we got him. We got the Son of God. Death and sin have won the day, and it is over. The world is permanently and totally and irredeemably fallen. We have won. But you and I now, 2,000 years later, we already know the punchline of this joke. That while the world thought that all was lost, God was doing something. And on Sunday morning, the earth would shake and a resurrection would take place in a phenomenal way. Jesus would rise from the dead, and all of the forces of this world, death and sin, that thought they had won, had the rug pulled out from under them. Good Friday and Easter Sunday, the two of them, form the greatest practical joke in human history. That while all of us were convinced that all was lost, God was doing something. God was saving us. And so I hope that that inspires you to think and reflect and pray this weekend, that as we think about how Jesus died for us, we would also be reminded that God had something so much bigger in mind. And that even though Friday might bring sorrow and fear, that Sunday is coming. And with it, the promise of resurrection. Have a good weekend and happy Easter.